Welcome to the Narrow Path radio broadcast. My name is Steve Gregg, and today is Wednesday, November 30th, 2005. Last day of November. We're entering into the final stretch of this year, starting tomorrow into our last month of the year, and of course approaching the busy Christmas season. But hopefully not too busy for you to participate in the show. If you have questions about the Bible or Christianity or something you'd like to say on some related topic, feel free to give me a call. I know a lot of you are going to be getting busy as the year draws near an end, but we hope that you will be able to take the time to participate if you have questions that you need to ask, and you just need to know this number to do so. It's 1-800-438-5090. It's 1-800-438-5090. This Friday, which is going to be December 2nd, I will be at a home that we commonly, about once a month, meet in for one of our typical Bible discussion groups. It's going to be at the home of Mike and Brenda, who are people that we have commonly been hosted by. They're very hospitality-oriented, and they love to have us meet in their homes, so we do. And it's not just that they love to have us, we enjoy being there. And if you'd like to be at that meeting Friday night, it's open to the public, but you need instructions to the place. And you'll need to call them to get those instructions. The number to call if you're interested in coming Friday night to that meeting in Santa Cruz is area code 831-475-8301. That's 475-8301, and you'll be speaking to Mike or Brenda, probably, or their daughter when you call, and you can get directions to that meeting. That's begin December 2nd, Friday night, 7 o'clock. It's an open meeting, open to our listeners to come and discuss the Bible or whatever you want to discuss, frankly. Of course, there are subjects that are out of our range that we wouldn't have much to say about, but if you want to talk about the things of God in any sense, you don't even have to be a Christian. Not everyone who comes is a Christian. We have a friend who's a Buddhist who comes frequently, and you know, you don't have to be a Christian to be there. But of course, what you're going to hear there is going to be Christian answers to the kind of issues that are raised. Anyway, it's a good time is generally had by all, and if you'd like to come to that, we'd invite you to come out, whether you can come regularly or not. It's only about once a month that it happens there, so it's not a weekly meeting. As for weekly meetings, however, in January, which is still a month away from us, I'm going to be starting a meeting on Tuesday nights weekly. These will be held at the Lighthouse Church in Santa Cruz, and I'm going to be teaching through the book of Acts. Take about half a year probably to get through the book of Acts verse by verse, and the other half of the year will be used to cover the rest of church history. That is, from the end of the book of Acts to the present day. Last time I taught that took about 30 sessions, so that's what I'm assuming it'll probably be. So we're going to spend the next year, Lord willing, on Tuesday nights going through the book of Acts, followed by the study of all of church history. That'll be fun for at least people who are interested in history. And even if you're not that interested in history, the book of Acts is always edifying. There will be more information about the location and times of those meetings when they get nearer, and they will be at our website. I'll also announce them on the air. Just giving you a heads up. I have not conducted any weekly meetings anywhere since I've moved to California, and that'll be the first weekly commitment I'm going to be making here. That'll be Tuesday nights in Santa Cruz. Now, I need to give you the number because we did have a caller, but that caller's not there now, and if you'd like to call, we have our lines open for you. The number is 1-800-438-5090. 1-800-438-5090. 2 or 3 days ago, I got this email, which I will probably respond to sometime during the program today, unless we get too busy. This is from Wes in Salem, Oregon. And he says, I'm going to have to pick it up in the middle of the paragraph. He said, I wonder, given all the answers one might give for why one believes the Bible is the Word of God and has sole authority in the life of Christians, what most convinces you? So the question is, of all the evidences that might be given, to support the inspiration of Scripture or its authority in the life of the believer, what evidence do I consider most compelling? Well, I believe there's a lot of evidences, but certainly the most compelling evidence of all is the evidence of Jesus himself. We have in the Gospels a historical record of this man named Jesus of Nazareth. It's recorded by 4 different witnesses. Three of the records are written by eyewitnesses, and the other is written by somebody who was a close companion of the eyewitnesses. So we've got very good historical information available about this man Jesus. And as you read the history of Jesus, the same as you'd read the history of any other man that we had reliable documents about, you discover that Jesus is not like any other man that we have documents about. He professed to be come down from God. He professed to be the Son of God and even God in the flesh. He didn't comment on that very frequently, but he did say that. And he did miracles. He raised the dead. He opened the eyes of blind people. And even the demons recognized who he was, and they fled at his presence. He could cast demons out of people with a single word. And this is a man of unusual significance, obviously, by his own claims and by the credibility that are lent to his claims by his actions. Most importantly, Jesus said that he came to give his life a ransom for all. And or a ransom for many, he said. The Bible does say he gave his life a ransom for all. But the point here is that Jesus' death, therefore, is not simply another death of another historical character that you might read about in history. It was a significant death that was deliberately given. Jesus died young. He didn't live out a lifetime. He surrendered his life early in life, in midlife, and he did so to give himself as a ransom for humanity. Now, there's no other human being in history of whom that can be said. And just in case someone wonders whether Jesus told the truth about that or not, he went ahead and proved that he knew what he was talking about by raising himself from the dead after he died. He said he would, and then he did. He predicted that he would rise from the dead 3 days after his death, and sure enough, he did. He was seen alive by hundreds of people after his resurrection, and his tomb was empty. And then the miracles that he had been doing in his lifetime now began to be performed through those who had been with him and who had been given his Spirit. Now, these are historical facts that are as well attested in terms of historical documents as any history we have, really, about almost anything that happened more than 100 years ago or so. And we don't have any serious doubts about most of the historical things we read in history books, but some people doubt the Gospels. I don't know why they do. I think they say because they were written by Christians, but I have not found that Christians are the most dishonest people of all. And, if I believe the testimony of people who are not Christians on historical matters, then I have every reason to believe the testimony of people who are Christians, especially if they're so Christian that they're willing to die for their testimony, as those who wrote the Gospels did. I've got good historical data there. And then, of course, as far as accepting the authority of the Old Testament, once I have discovered from my historical research about this man Jesus that he is indeed the Son of God, that he is indeed the one who spoke infallibly from God, when I find that he accepted the scriptures of Moses and of David and of the prophets in the Old Testament as authoritative and took them as a final word of authority, then I find I can do no better. I can do no better than he did. So it starts with Jesus. The reason I believe the Bible is authoritative is because it starts with Jesus. Jesus is a historical character that I can read reliable information about. I can decide who I think he is, and it's kind of hard to read the information without deciding that he's who he said he was. And since he is who he said he was, then I accept his testimony on the authority of the Old Testament scriptures, and I accept the testimony of those that he appointed who knew him to give testimony to what he taught as well. That'd be his apostles, and they wrote the New Testament. So I have authoritative writings in the Old and New Testament, and I know they're authoritative because Jesus said they are. Jesus authorized the apostles to write the New Testament books, and he certainly accepted the authority of those Old Testament books. So my opinion of the Bible rests entirely upon my opinion of who Jesus is. If I reject Jesus' claims, then I have no reason to accept the Bible, necessarily. But if I accept Jesus' claims, then I have absolutely no freedom to disregard the Bible. So the center of my life and my belief is not so much the Bible as it is Jesus. The Bible is not about itself. The Bible is about Jesus. And Jesus spoke about the Bible. So, I learn about Jesus from the historical records, and then, of course, I take his comments as authoritative about the rest of Scripture. That's the best reason I know for believing the Bible. Second best would be the fulfillment of prophecy. The fact that prophets said they were speaking from God, then they predicted things that were to happen hundreds of years after their times in specific detail, and those things did happen in the detail that they described, and I'd say that's pretty impressive. If God wanted to prove that somebody was speaking from him, I'm not sure of a better way he could do so. And, of course, Jesus accepted the prophets as inspired as well. So those are the best reasons I know for accepting the Bible. There are other good reasons as well, but nothing as good as that I'm aware of. Our lines are full now, so we need to actually get on with the business of taking phone calls. If you'd like to call when one of these lines clears, the number is 1-800-438-5090. Frank from Albany, Oregon, welcome to the program. Good to talk to you.
Too.
Hi.
I have two questions, as I usually do, and I need to get the answer over the radio, if I may. The first one was I had originally thought that you thought that the beast was Nero, but then I just heard you recently saying it's the system, so I wanted you to comment on that. And then the other one is just purely your speculation on something, because God said that he was going to set his sign in the clouds to be a rainbow for them, so I was wondering, was it because they didn't have any rain before, or they just didn't have any rainbow before that it made it special, or I don't know. And those are the two questions. Thanks.
Okay, Frank. I appreciate your call.
Bye.
God bless you. Bye-bye. All right. About the beast, I believe that the beast is Nero, and I believe the beast is more than Nero. What I believe is that the beast in Revelation represents governments, any governments of any time in history that persecute Christians. I believe that the beast is a symbol for that phenomenon, a symbol for that spirit of Antichrist that exists in all governments that persecute Christianity. Now, in the time that John wrote, I believe that Nero was in power, and therefore he was the beast to that generation. After he died, there were others that were the beast, as it were. So we do find in Revelation indicators that John's audience was to recognize Nero as the beast, because he was the beast in their day. But Nero the man did not exhaust the symbol. He was simply the contemporary representation of that which was symbolized in the beast in his day. So, both are true. I believe that Nero is the beast, but I believe the beast really represents more than Nero. The office that Nero held, or the function that he performed in history as a persecuting power, persecuting Christians, that function is more what the beast is about. And he was just the representative of that moment, in my opinion. Now, about the rainbow, I believe that I don't know if there was rain before the flood. Christians commonly say there was not rain before the flood. We're not told that anywhere in Scripture. But one of the ways that might be deduced, if it is true, is because the rainbow was apparently not seen before the flood. And the rainbow, I don't know that we're supposed to understand the rainbow as a supernatural phenomenon. I believe, now I can't, but I believe that scientists could give a scientific explanation of how the light passing through the water vapor in the sky, casts a prism-like spectrum of light across the sky in what we call a rainbow. And I'm sure that there would have been rainbows as long as there was the conditions, the water and the light and so forth that creates a rainbow today. Presumably the laws of nature were no different before the flood, and therefore had there been rain before the flood, there presumably would have been rainbows as well. And that it would appear there were no rainbows before the flood, because after the flood God said he's going to give them a sign. The bow in the clouds would be the sign. Now, some people believe that it did rain before the flood, and there were rainbows before the flood, but that God at this point was simply saying, from now on, whenever you see a rainbow, take it as a message from me that I'm not going to destroy the world with a flood again. So, some say it's not really the rainbow that was new at that point. It's simply the application or the significance of the rainbow, or the significance that God attached to it at that point. So it could have been a familiar phenomenon, that God would say, just like when Jesus took Passover with his disciples, that was a familiar thing, and he said, now from now on, when you eat this bread and drink this cup, do it in remembrance of me. He took something they were very familiar with from all their life, but he now gave it a new meaning. And it's possible that that's what God did with the rainbow. Perhaps there had been rain from the earliest history and rainbows too, but it had never been taken to mean what God told them it meant now. And so I don't know how to answer that because we don't know. We don't have enough data to know whether it rained or not before the flood. But certainly chapter 2 of Genesis mentions a condition that prevailed early on where a mist rose up and watered the ground and it had not rained on the earth. But the Bible doesn't say that condition prevailed all the way up until the time of Noah. And it would be an assumption that can't be verified from Scripture to say so. Therefore, I'm going to have to remain agnostic on that point about whether there was rain before the flood or whether rainbows existed before. But if there was rain before, there must have been rainbows, I would guess. That'd be just taking it from a common sense point of view. Appreciate your call, Frank, and let's talk next to Rich, who's calling from Eugene, Oregon. Rich, welcome to the Narrow Path.
Steve, blessings. How are you?
Good to hear from you.
Yeah, you as well. 2 questions, and we'll take them off the air. One, I was having an online discussion with somebody, and they brought up that Scripture spoke about unicorns, which surprised me. And then when I looked it up in the King James, they were correct. So yep. I wanted to ask you why the reference to unicorns in the King James. And then I had a second question about the Messianic prophecies that the Jews say were not fulfilled, what they allude to. So I'll take these off the air if you don't mind.
Okay, you can do that.
I'm sorry, Steve.
That's fine.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye. Now, Dwayne, my assistant producer just went down, so I can't hang up that call. You're going to have to hang that up for me. Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'm going to have to reboot that, it looks like. Okay, what do we got here? We've got a question about the Messianic prophecies, and because my equipment went down, I was a little distracted. I got to remember what his first question was. Let's work on the Messianic ones first, and then we'll take the next one. There are prophecies that the Jews believe were not fulfilled about the Messiah, which Christians believe are fulfilled about the Messiah. There's about 300 Old Testament passages which we believe Jesus fulfilled in his first coming. But there's even more that some Christians accept than what the Jews would accept, even if they accepted the historical account of Christ. I think that the Jews, of course, expected that the Messiah would come as a military deliverer, and Jesus did not do that. Now, they took it that way because there are prophecies about him setting his people free and about conquering their enemies and things like that. Now, Jesus didn't do that, and therefore Jesus did not fulfill the expectations of the Jews about the Messiah. Well, he didn't do it the way they expected, but the Bible indicates that he did fulfill the prophecies that the Messiah was to fulfill, and I believe that the conquering of their enemies and such things were fulfilled in a spiritual sense. Jesus conquered Satan, who is our real enemy. When Jesus was not yet born, the angel said to Joseph about Jesus, his name should be called Jesus because he will save his people from their sins. So the Jews expected the Messiah to save his people from the Romans. But the angel said, no, he's going to save his people from their sins. It's a spiritual salvation. It's spiritual enemies that need to be conquered. And so we read in Colossians chapter 2 and verse 15 that when Jesus died, he disarmed the principalities and the powers, which are the demonic forces in Paul's language. And he made a show of them openly, triumphing over them in the cross. So he did triumph over our enemies. And he did set his people free spiritually. Jesus said, if the Son sets you free, you'll be free indeed. He says, you'll know that if you're my disciples, you'll know the truth, and the truth will make you free. The Messiah was supposed to bring peace and prosperity and joy to his people. And Jesus didn't bring political peace or physical prosperity or economic prosperity, and the Jews were looking for that, and he didn't do that. But Christians believe that he brought peace as a fruit of the Spirit to his people. We have a peace that passes understanding. It's a fruit of the Spirit that Christ has brought us. Jesus said, "Peace I give unto you, not as the world gives, but he says, but my peace I give unto you." So there were things that the Jews thought the Messiah would bring in a political and physical sense, which the Messiah Jesus came and he brought in a spiritual sense. And in that sense, Christians recognize him as fulfilling those prophecies, whereas the Jews don't. And that's the main difference. And I have to, like I said, I was having technical problems here when you stated your first question, and I'm embarrassed to say I don't remember what your first question was. So I hope you'll call back and give it again, because like I said, I'm embarrassed that I forgot what it was you asked. You did ask two, and I actually had to reboot some things on my computer just about the time you were asking it. So my apologies. Please call back and give me that other question again. Once I hear it again, I'll say, "Oh yeah, how embarrassing that I forgot." Well, I already say how embarrassing that I forgot. Anyway, I'm going to take another call right now, and if that first question could be called in again, I'll take that also next. Let's talk to Craig, who's calling from Eugene, Oregon also. Craig, welcome to the program.
His first question was about Eugene, about unicorns in the Bible.
Oh, thank you, Craig. Okay, that's good. Now, Rich, you don't have to call back in. Craig, let me answer that real quickly because it's not too hard, and then I'll take thank you for remembering. Unicorns in the Bible. Okay, yeah, the King James Version does mention unicorns in a number of places, and that is because the King James translators, when they encountered a certain Hebrew word and didn't know what it meant, they thought it meant a unicorn. But knowledge of the Hebrew language has increased a great deal in the past 500 years since the King James was translated, and modern Hebrew scholars now believe that the word that was translated unicorn in 1611 actually doesn't mean unicorn at all. It actually means a wild ox. And so modern translations, instead of using the word unicorn, they say wild ox. This is not because of any embarrassment about the King James using the word unicorn. It simply has come from a greater understanding of the Hebrew language. And so I'm not sure what it was about that word that made the King James translators think it was talking about a unicorn. I suppose back in those days people believed in unicorns, but that was not the meaning of the Hebrew word, and so that represents a mistranslation in the King James Version. Okay, Craig. Thank you.
Yeah, I've been struggling with this one question for a little bit, and it's just basically when Jesus came and he was talking about your enemies and turning the other cheek, and I had just a hypothetical question because it was one of those, the only way I could set it up was if I was in a parking lot somewhere with my wife and my wife was physically attacked, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to defend my wife? Am I supposed to, as a Christian, basically, do nothing and turn the other cheek? What would be my role in that situation?
Well, there are two opinions about that, and I'll tell you what both of them are, and I'll tell you what mine is. And if you want a fuller answer to that question, there's an article I've written on that's posted on our website about the use of force in resisting evil. At our website, there's a link that says topical articles, and one of them is on this topic. One view, that which is held by the Anabaptist tradition, is that non-resistance is an absolute value with God, and that when Jesus said, "Don't resist the evil man," and if someone strikes you on one cheek, turn the other cheek, that this becomes an inflexible value in Christianity, and that non-resistance is what it's all about. I don't necessarily think that that's true, but they would say that it's better to simply trust God, even when you're being violently attacked, or maybe even when your family is, because God said, "Don't resist the evil man." So we're called upon just to trust God in those cases, and if we don't resist, they say, then God will come to our rescue, or at least His will be done. Even dying can be God's will for us. So they just say you surrender yourself into the hands of God by not resisting. Now, I believe that that's true in some cases. I believe that when your life is in danger, and the only way you could save your life is to violate your Christian faith, then it is right to go ahead and die and entrust yourself into God's hands. But when you're talking about protecting another person who depends upon you and whom God has put under your protection, I think there's a stewardship there, and I think there is an obligation to resist an attack against an innocent person, not only your wife and children, but somebody else's wife or children, or another man, or if you see somebody being physically attacked, and you simply walk by on the other side of the road, like the Levite and the priest did in the story of the Good Samaritan, I think you're really you're not exhibiting your Christian duty and Christian love. So I think especially since your wife and children are put in a position to be vulnerable and to entrust their safety to you, that you have a particular obligation there, but I wouldn't restrict it to them, Now, in terms of resisting the evil man, there still is an obligation that I think Jesus was illustrating when he said, don't resist evil, and if a man strikes you on one cheek, turn the other also. I think the obligation is to love the person who you would not naturally love. And Jesus' comments on this are followed a few verses later by his statement, love your enemies, do good to those who persecute you, and so forth. What he's talking about here is that a Christian is to be of a different spirit than a worldly person. And if somebody's your enemy, even if they're hurting you, even if they are insulting you, even if they're robbing you, you should still love them, and you should do the loving thing. Now, in a case where someone just comes and strikes you across the face, a lot of times the most loving thing to do is just absorb the injury and walk away, or turn the other cheek, as Jesus said. But there are other situations where a person's life may be at stake, and innocent victims are in peril. And I think in those cases, turning the other cheek is not the loving thing to do. But at the same time, resistance can take a more or a less loving form. That is to say, if you've got a gun, let us say, or a baseball bat, and you're capable of killing the man, I don't think you should make that your first objective. If you can stop him without killing him, I think it's far more loving. Now, I don't know, if you couldn't stop him without killing him, I'd have to say it's a toss-up for me there. I'd say you'd have to probably kill him. But I can't imagine a situation where you had the force to stop someone without killing them, or where you had to kill him, and you couldn't do it without killing him. If you had a weapon, or if you had physical strength superior to it, you could restrain the attack, I believe, without killing the man. And I would prefer to do it that way. I wouldn't prefer to kill him. Of course, the temptation would be to kill him so that he doesn't sue you. If you kill him, you don't get sued. If you shoot him in the leg, you probably have to go to court and lose your house. Right. But I still feel that Jesus' teaching about loving your enemies would incline you to take that risk. And you should defend the innocent. And one of the most Christian ways to do it, I know, would be to put yourself between the attacker and the attackee. The victim. That would mean that you can absorb any injury that was intended toward them, but that even then you don't have to do so without resistance, especially if you have reason to believe that after that person takes you out, they're going to go after them anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of times defending yourself is simply the necessary thing to do to defend others, and your defending yourself may not be motivated by a selfishness at all. It may simply be an obligation to keep yourself alive to protect them from impending danger.
Thank you.
All right, that's how I see it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
God bless you, Craig. Bye-bye. All right, you're listening to the Narrow Path radio broadcast, and my name is Steve Gregg. We've had steady calls since the program began, but we don't now. If you want to give me a call, we can talk to you about whatever's on your mind. Now, controversial issues have been raised and discussed, and if you have a different viewpoint from that of the host, feel free to call and give that viewpoint and defend it. You're welcome to do so. We'll do it on my dime, but you have to make the call. The number is 1-800-438-5090. It's 1-800-438-5090 if you'd like to join us on the show. We've got about less than half the program left. So if you've been procrastinating, it's time to stop doing that. I want to remind you that this Friday, day after tomorrow, December 2nd, I will be speaking again in the Santa Cruz area, actually in Santa Cruz, and a lot of our listeners are in Santa Cruz area. And if you want information about that, you can call the hosts of that meeting. Their phone number is 475-8301. And that's Mike or Brenda. And those of you who regularly come to these meetings know exactly where that is. But if you've never been to a meeting and you're interested in going, you may need to get directions. So feel free to do that. Love to see some of you. This will be Friday night, day after tomorrow, in Santa Cruz, about 7 o'clock. Let's talk next to Craig, who's calling from Royal Oaks, California. If I can get his button activated. There we go. Hi, Greg. Welcome to the program.
Yeah, I called a couple days ago. It was about a family matter.
Right. Uh-huh.
And I may have misinferred or gave you some misinformation. My wife and I are in a beautiful godly union.
Uh-huh.
All of our children are absolutely beautiful, saved people.
Uh-huh.
I'm talking about their grandparents, aunts, and uncles.
Uh-huh.
And the thing is, there's a lot of influences that come from the families that I feel like I need to protect the children from because they're extremely worldly.
Okay, yeah, that's a different issue, isn't it?
And that's you kind of went on the task the other day, and I was like, I didn't get the point across.
Yeah.
Because, I'm the only saved person in my family. My wife is the only saved person in her family.
See, yeah, you told me you're the only saved person in your family. I didn't know if you meant your birth family.
My birth family.
All right.
And and I read in the New Testament in different places where, in 2 John, it says, if you even bid them Godspeed, those who don't bring the doctrine of Christ, we then become in some way partakers of their evil deeds. And
yeah, that's definitely talking about being cooperative with them. It's in the context of not taking them into your home, and not bidding them Godspeed would mean you don't wish them well on their journey, on their mission. Yeah, I agree. Now, if your kids have aunts and uncles or grandparents who are a bad influence on them, you have an obligation to protect your children. Now, you can do that by communicating with those unsaved adults and say, listen, you need to know that the most important thing in our life and for our children is our faith in God, and we're raising our children certain standards, and we love you people, but we have to ask that when we have our children around you that you don't try to influence them in such and such a way, or that whatever, if
they honor the Lord. I mean, that's the problem, is that the kids, we pray daily, we rejoice consistently. My 4-year-old Sapphire is singing to the Lord daily throughout the day. And it's just a spiritual thing.
Okay, but the thing is, you can't expect non-Christian people to live up to Christian standards.
Right. Well, my point is, and what I've done in my own family is I ask them, I urge them to look into the Word so they might understand me, and to find out, more about what motivates me and why I've changed so much and who Jesus is.
Yeah.
And they just disregard that over and over. And after a few years, it was just like, look, until you do that, if you don't regard me enough to at least, it's a couple hundred pages, to look into it, I can't relate with you anymore, because I feel that's what the Spirit has commanded of me.
Well, I think that's a valid approach to take. On the other hand, I don't know what kinds of things they're doing that are you feel are going to corrupt you. So are you talking about certain forms of entertainment they have, or the way they speak, their foul language?
The movies, and it's just always about things and money, and
it's
just there's so much in the world, and we live on a couple acres in the country, and we've got a lot of animals, and we live a very simple life, and we have a beautiful Christian family at church, and older gals that are like grandmotherly figures to our children and such, but our own families are just so worldly that it's like it becomes a spiritual battle whenever they come around.
Okay, well, see, I don't think total isolation is the right approach unless it's absolutely an extreme situation. I would say this, that you should determine the kinds of things that you'd be comfortable with your children being around, and things you're uncomfortable with them doing with the relatives, and just communicate that. Say, listen, are you willing to relate to us on this basis?
Right.
If not, we can't come out for Christmas. We can't bring the kids over because you're not going to honor our child raising standards and so forth. Yeah, right, exactly. And so if they say, well, no, we're not going to change for you, then say, okay, that's fine. We give you the right not to change, but we're not going to bring our children. Yeah, exactly. Now, there's another thing to consider, though. I mean, this is not to take away from that, but it's something for you to consider. My wife and I homeschooled all of our children. We had 5 children. And we were very protected. We lived on acreage with animals. We lived off to ourselves. We had mainly just other homeschooling families that were close to us. We had other Christians who weren't homeschoolers that were close to us, but not as close. And my wife especially was extremely protective of the influences. We didn't have a TV in our home, and there was no secular music there, and so forth. And And yet, there came a time where I realized that my children need to have some awareness of the fact that there are
where they are.
Where other people are. Yeah, I mean, and
what they're going to have to contend with to be alive in this place.
Right, and especially their relatives, because if you don't let your children ever know their grandparents or aunts or uncles or cousins, the time may come when they're in their teens or older that they may resent that. They might think, I wish I had known my grandma.
Right.
Now, but see, so you want to make sure that your kids are strong enough at some point. Maybe not when they're real little, I don't know, and maybe not if the influences are extremely bad, but at some point the kids have to be told, now Grandma and Grandpa, they don't know Jesus. They don't believe like we do, but we're gonna see them. We're gonna try to love them and try to show them what Jesus is like in our lives. But just realize that Mommy and Daddy don't approve of some of the stuff that they do. I mean, there comes a time when the kids have to be acclimated to the world outside, and the best time to do it is, of course, while they're still in your house under your guidance. Otherwise,
under my protection.
Yeah, otherwise they're going to grow up with totally protected, and they're going to end up outside your home without any protection. Then they're going to be exposed to it for the first time.
Yeah.
So you don't want to isolate.
It's kind of a fine line.
It is. It takes being led by the Spirit, and it takes being wise.
Right. Well, and I appreciate your insight, but I do feel like I read in the new, again, I had pointed out in the Gospels many times where it's talking about the same situation where Jesus was giving the disciples the commandments, but he was saying to them, if they don't hear you in a house, walk away from it and dust the dust off your feet as a testimony.
Yeah, but he was talking especially about going into a town and staying in the homes of strangers. There is such a thing as honoring your father and your mother, but that doesn't mean you have to surrender the standards that you want to raise your children by. But you need to honor your parents in some ways, and
yeah,
I think
my dad's such an atheist. It's really hard to do that.
I know, but he's still your dad, and I don't say he should have access to your children alone, because he may try to undermine what you've taught them. But if there could be situations where the kids are in your presence and in your parents' presence for brief periods of time, where
they get to understand that they have these relatives.
Right, exactly. I don't think you should isolate them so much that they don't have that opportunity at all.
How much of a reality do you think this point is, where it talks about those that are not saved are actual pawns of the devil? And the reason I say it feels like a spiritual battle, especially with like my mother-in-law and my father. I feel like there's an evil spirit that when we are around one another is like motivates them. And I hear them say things and I see things in their eyes.
Yeah.
And it's really...
That's very possible.
What's that?
That's very possible. It could be a spiritual warfare. It certainly is a spiritual warfare. And if you find that visiting the grandparents, when you come home, your children are acting strangely or
they do that
whatever.
Thing. They start to bicker like they don't normally do. And, weird things manifest themselves. And
that's one of the things that you could communicate to your folks. Say, listen, we love you and everything like that, but there's something about it when we visit your home. Our children have such and such problems for some time afterward, and we're trying to protect our children from that. So here's the standards that we're trying to raise our children with, and honor them.
The Bible says too that our way of thinking, because we believe the Bible, is folly to them that are worldly. And so we say those things, and they just dismiss us and act like we're idiots.
I know. Well, I have to deal with that every day because my voice is going out to thousands of people who, many of them are not Christians, I'm sure, and I'm sure half the things I say, if not all of them, sound foolish to them. But you just deal with it. You know what's right.
I'm not totally off base in the way that I'm approaching this.
No, I don't think so. I mean, but like I said, I wouldn't want to totally isolate them unless it became absolutely necessary. Now, in a situation where the bad influence is extreme, then I think it would be necessary.
Right. Okay. Well, God bless you, brother. I appreciate your insight.
All right, Craig. God bless you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye now. All right, we're going to talk next to Glenn, who's calling from Duncanville, Texas. Glenn, welcome to the program.
Well, hello.
Hi.
Got a question about a verse in 1 John 3:2. Beloved, we are now the children of God, and it was not yet revealed what we shall be, but when we know that when He is revealed, we shall be like Him, because shall see Him as He is. Does that verse in any way relate back? How does that verse it gives us the enlightenment on Romans 8:29.
I think it's directly related. Romans 8:29 talks about the manifestation of the sons of God, and it's referring to the time when Jesus comes back. Paul equates it with what he calls the redemption of the body. In verse 23 is the redemption of our bodies. You're talking about in verse 29 about being conformed to his image. It's the same too. In Romans 8:23 and such, Paul's talking about the redemption of our body, which is our resurrection, and he calls it the manifestation of the sons of God. And that's what John says. It has not yet been manifested what we are, but we are the sons of God already. But when Jesus appears, then it will be manifested that we are the sons of God. Now, verse 29 talks about how God has predestined us to be conformed into the image of Christ, and it's obviously the same subject. When Jesus returns, we will be like him as fully as created beings can be.
Well, more specifically, does 1 John 3:2 directly relate back to Romans 8:29 in saying that it is the children of God that are predestined?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Is that really what it's saying? Is that what 1 John is saying?
Right. Those who are children of God are the ones who are destined to become like him. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. Well,
Romans 8:29 is not necessarily saying that certain people have been predestined to become children of God, but rather God knows those who are his children, and he has predestined that they will grow up into maturity and be like Jesus.
And that's what 1 John 3:2 says.
Right.
Very clearly there I think Romans 8:29 does also. But I think 1 John 3:2. I had never seen 1 John 3:2 reference to Romans 8. And that's why I was asking. I maybe thought I was missing something.
And I'd also cross-reference it to 2 Corinthians 3:18, where it says that we all with unveiled faces, beholding as in a glass the glory of the Lord, are changed from glory to glory into that same image. So it's at Jesus' coming we'll be fully like him, but in the meantime we're becoming more like him as we keep our eyes on him.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot.
Okay, good talking to you, Glenn. God bless you. All right. We have a couple lines open if you'd like to call 1-800-438-5090. That's 1-800-438-5090. And we're going to talk next to Paul, who's calling from Aptos, California. Hi, Paul.
How you doing, Steve? Good to hear from you.
Good to talk to you again.
Actually, hey, my question has to do with the effects of the fall upon creation and your thoughts on that. What I'm thinking of is when you look at nature, especially predators, for example, or diseases that just seem to be so mindless, like that gentleman in Time magazine that talked about his disbelief in God because, well, how would a loving God allow for a disease that actually just destroy the eyes of infants, or a species of fish that sees off other fish eyes? So it's not that God justly cannot allow for these things, and he did kill the first animal as far as we know. I guess we don't really know, but it seems like he at least did that to make the skins for Adam and Eve. But what are your thoughts on that? Because when you look at a predator, for example, this is an animal that is built to capture, seize, and kill other creatures and is nourished by the food it derives from them. It seems like if you say that the fall did not affect nature, well, then you have these terribly vicious beasts and a very unforgiving nature, which I know God could have set it up that way, but I don't know. As a Christian, it seems a bit inconsistent with a loving, harmonious God, unless I'm just being have a weak stomach. But that's what I'm getting at. Or do you think that the fall actually, like you hinted at with the rainbow perhaps earlier in the show, actually changed some of the physical laws that we observe? I don't know if there's evidence for that from the records of geology and et cetera, but you see where I'm going with this, that were things radically changed or not? And if not, it seems like we have a God who is very good but very untamed. What do you think about that?
Well, I was just thinking about that again. yesterday, I think it was, or yeah, I believe it was yesterday. I was contemplating that subject. I was thinking about certain wasps that they lay their eggs in the body of tarantulas. The wasp actually gets under the belly of a living tarantula, injects its eggs into its body, and the young larvae feed off of the living tarantula as they grow. They hatch inside the body. It sounds like, and of course when I've talked to atheists about this kind of thing, they like to suggest that, that's got to be excruciatingly painful for the tarantula. How could God create a thing like that? And I think you've got it correct. There are two possibilities, and we don't know which one is correct. One is that some of these behaviors are the result of the fall. Now, certainly there's a lot of people who'd say that predatory behavior on the part of animals is a result of the fall, because when God first made the animals, it says in Genesis 1 that he gave them every herb and every plant to eat, and that the herbs would be food for the animals and for man. And we know that man was not permitted to eat animal meat until Genesis chapter 9 after the flood. So some have presumed that no animals ate animal meat before then either. But that raises questions about the anatomy of certain animals. Certain animals whose teeth and such look as if they're made for one thing only, and that's, killing and tearing and so forth. So there are some unknowns there. There's several possibilities have crossed my mind, and I don't know which one is true. One possibility is that even though the Bible says that God gave the plants to be food for all the animals, that some animals, in addition to eating plants, ate other animals. Maybe only animals that died on their own initially. I don't know. Someone had to clean up that mess, and less animals never died. Now, some say, well, before the fall, no animals died. Well, that's probably true, because the fall, I assume, happened very early on, and animals would not have had the opportunity to die. But if mankind had lived on the earth for thousands and thousands of years, and animals didn't die at all during that time, let's face it, the ecosystem would be very much overburdened with living things. Now, I don't think necessarily God made animals to live forever. I think he did make man potentially to live forever if he'd eat of the tree of life, but I don't think animals had that option. And so I think that animals were made to live and die. And it's possible that animals that are made to eat flesh were designed to eat the flesh of decaying or dead animals to clean up the mess, or like some animals, like some vultures and jackals and so forth do now. But that after the fall, that some of these animals took on more of an aggressive nature, just like man did, and began to attack living things. That strikes me as a possibility. I don't know if it's true. I would say anything that is truly cruel or that is inconsistent with a loving God must be something that was introduced after the fall. But some of the things that strike us as cruel may not be as cruel as they seem to us. We tend to sympathize with animals, especially in our day and age, more than maybe in previous days and age, and we assume that animals feel the same pain. We do experience the same phenomena of pain, and I don't know whether they all do or not. The higher animals certainly experience pain. I don't know whether a tarantula experienced pain while it's being eaten from the inside. I'm not sure how we could register it. Its brain is so small. I don't know if we could pick up brain waves, about pain from a bug like that. But even if animals experience pain, they may not have the higher faculties to appreciate how painful pain is. We do, because we even contemplate pain, We can suffer before the pain arrives because we're rational enough to think about it and so forth. And I don't know, it's possible that certain painful experiences are not as painful to some of the animals, but I'm not willing to say that I know that.
Right.
In other words, I don't know the answer to your question, but I've thought about it a great deal, and I'm sure most thinking people have. I think it's very possible that critters like mosquitoes that just live off of blood, that they are a corruption of an original form. I don't think that God made animals originally to eat the blood of other animals, but in the fall, we certainly know there's been an awful lot of devolution. There's the evolutionists think that we think there's been no change in the animal kingdom. But there's no reason for us to suggest there's been no change in the animal kingdom. There has been. There are mutants. There are mutations. There's degeneration in species, and certain behaviors, and even certain diets of certain animals may have gradually developed as a result of the fall through negative kinds of mutational forces. But I see, I'm not a scientist, so I can't explain things scientifically. But I think theologically, we'd have to assume that certain kinds of animal behavior reflect post-fall conditions and more than pre-fall conditions. That'd be my guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, the destiny of every cattle is to be eaten either by a predator, a human, or maggots after it drops dead. And you're right, it has to be cleaned up. And the ecosystem needs that decay to both be cleaned up and to then re-nurture the environment as well. And I heard a Christian once on mosquitoes mention that God uses them and flies to drive herds to higher elevations where the mosquitoes won't follow, but in so doing, the herds fertilize the upper elevation. So there's a way there helpful, actually.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. And it's probable that microorganisms were all friendly toward, man originally. But they mutate so quickly in so many ways that after the fall, I think it was just a matter of time before certain microorganisms became deadly to man.
Yeah.
And I don't think God created disease.
Yeah. Okay. Well, interesting stuff. I'll give you a call later on off the show hours and connect. So enjoy the rest of the show, Stephen. Thanks.
Yeah, it'd be great to see you, Paul. God bless you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, we're going to talk next to Richard from Corvallis. Only have a minute or so left. So, Richard, welcome to the program.
Hi, Steve. I just had a quick comment about your discussion on wasps and things. I work in agriculture, and there are a great deal of those parasitic insects that are very important pest control agents for us because of the mechanism that they use. They're often very specific for a certain insect that's eating the crop, and we can bring those certain parasitic wasps or other types of insects in and provide very effective large-scale control. And the way that I've often thought about the caller's question is that it seems painful and it seems unfair, but in my Christian life there are things that are painful that I go through, but God knows that they're tremendously beneficial for me. And even though I don't recognize all the benefits, I think that there's a lot of application to that in the biological realm as well. The predatory animals that we see, I'm not a great mammalian biologist, but there is a great benefit I think we derive from having those animals around. So that's just a comment I wanted to throw in. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. So if this be madness, at least there's a method to it.
Yeah,
I appreciate that. God bless you, Richard. That's an interesting point. Also, we simply assume that pain is a bad thing. And the reason we assume it is because we don't like it. And we have to remember that not everything that we don't like is itself bad in the cosmic sense of the term. A lot of people don't like abstinence before marriage, or they don't like, avoiding drunkenness. And yet, things that we don't like sometimes are better for us. And pain can be good for us, especially since the fall. I don't know whether God intended originally. Oh, okay. Something's not coming through there? Okay. Anyway, I think that sometimes pain turns our thoughts to God. I don't know whether that would be necessary without the fall. I simply don't claim to know. These are mysterious things. But certainly, I don't consider any of those considerations to be arguments against God. They simply are areas where God knows more about it than we do, and I accept the fact that He's entitled to know things without me knowing them. Anyway, we're out of time. Thanks for joining us. I hope you'll join us again tomorrow. We'll continue this discussion. Our theme music's not playing, but I know it's time to quit. So God bless you. We'll talk again tomorrow.